This is the forecast for the third quarter 2010. We have had a very difficult year so far, and I don't see that the third quarter is going to get much better. It will lighten up in the fourth, but this quarter is still going to be as much difficult as it was in the first and the second. So we have the Arab Spring that happened in January with the solar eclipse, where basically most of the Arab nations revolted after Tanzania. Egypt overthrew Mubarak, and then we had it spread through most of the Arab world, but many of those nations squashed the rebellion, but not in Syria, because Assad is fighting his people tooth and nail, and not in Libya, because Gaddafi is fighting to the death, literally to his death, against his people, to the point that we had NATO bombing Libya to support the rebels. The rebels have now been recognized as the true form of government in Syria and has released the Gaddafi government's money to them, but yet he holds out no matter what. And looking at his chart, which is extremely activated, there's a strong possibility that he could meet his death or an untimely end, an abrupt termination sometime in mid-August. But I thought he wouldn't last this long, so I could be absolutely wrong in that. But I would think that this month would be his death knell for his resistance against his own people. However, in Syria with Assad, I don't see that yet. I think that he's going to be fighting his people tooth and nail, and that we are going to be having more uprisings. There's only a remote possibility that he might be put aside by September, but by looking at his chart. But that's a difficult one to call because there is no international support for the Syrian people. Now on to our debt crisis, which has been brewing and still going on. Supposedly has a crisis point in August the 2nd. I've been looking at President Obama's chart, and then House Majority Leader John Boehner, and they both have serious Saturn aspects against their Venuses. So they're meeting with frustration, calcification, resistance against the people that they're having to deal with, and of course against each other, which is the Republicans with the Democrats. Considering what's coming up in early August, I don't see this as being resolved. I see this as coming to a crisis point that could really affect our financial markets. So I think they are going to be toe-to-toe with each other, and going to see who's going to blink first. And it's all strategy, because they're trying to make the debt crisis only extend through the end of the year so that they can force another crisis with the Obama administration and make him look bad for the election. And then if they give him a bill that's unacceptable, then they'll be forcing him to veto that bill, and then he looks like he's the one to blame for our debt crisis that's coming up. So it's interesting and frustrating as a citizen to watch this, and they're both playing chicken with each other, basically. Since we have such a difficult period coming up with a Mars-Uranus in August, and that usually means violence, unexpected, abrupt changes and terminations. You can see death by gunshot or bombings, and we already had that this week in Norway with a domestic terrorist that killed many, many people. I'm not sure if it was in the hundreds, but it was very serious and very shocking for Norway, and a first for them as a country. So I would expect that we would see some more kinds of activities, even if it's just locally within your own community. You'll see a lot more domestic violence during this period of time, or car accidents. So with this, I am going to stop the video portion of this and go over into the chart and show you what the aspect timings look like. The third quarter 2011, and I have put particular emphasis in August because we had a relatively uneventful July. We had continuing Arab war fights for the Arab Spring. That is an armed conflict that I see continuing on through the full third quarter. But some major events could have happened right in the early part of August, because you'll notice the red vertical lines that I have a Mars square Uranus and a Mars opposition Pluto aspect that is coming up from August the 2nd until August the 15th, with the center around the 10th and the 12th. And that should be a crisis period of time. We could see the markets panic. There could be more violent death, shocking events, or abrupt ends. And this aspects Gaddafi's chart, so I'm wondering whether or not this will be the end of the Gaddafi regime, because they are forcing his ambassadors home or giving them asylum, and they've taken his international funds away from him. So his chart is very heavily stressed. I'm wondering whether or not our debt limit, ceiling, and budget conflicts are going to be resolved, or if we're going to have an all-out battle during the first half of August, because I think that they are going to have a stalemate and they're going to play chicken with each other. And then we see that in the middle of August, particularly August the 25th, that's the center of the aspect, that there could be more resistance and frustration. The old breaks down. People get very resistant in their positions, and there is much frustration and holding back from resolution during that time. And then the last major aspect that happens in September is a moon wobble, which is a minor type of solar eclipse, but it's a 90-degree aspect, not a conjunction or an opposition. And so with moon wobbles, you can find another small crisis points, and that hits Gaddafi's chart and Assad's chart. So I'm thinking that if we don't have a resolution with Gaddafi in August the 10th, that we're more likely to see that happening definitely by September the 12th in September. So these are difficult times. This is not a happy year. It's not a pleasant chart. And we find that we have great conflicts between armed uprising with the youth saying we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to throw the old bums out. We're going to throw out the old hierarchy. And we see in the United States that we have a stalemate between our branches of government. And I think that we will find that kind of recalcitrant resistance true through the bulk of the year, particularly through the end of this quarter. Things should lighten up on the fourth quarter. But I can't say that these are great times. I am concerned that in the early part of August that we could have a crisis in the financial markets. Maybe not necessarily in the U.S., but we certainly could see that in the European markets, because they keep kicking the can down the road with the crisis with the BRICS and the PIG organizations, the crisis that's in Ireland. They're talking about Portugal and, of course, in Greece, and now they were talking about in Italy. So these are difficult times, and with this, I would suggest one, particularly for August, is don't react immediately for bad news during this time. Count to 10. Take time to assess this situation. Try to act after August the 15th as possible, and it's possible that the situation or event could resolve itself by you not acting. So with this, we wish you the very best, and thank you for listening to us.